What's up coders, and welcome to the 6th video in the data dashboard series. Now in this video we'll be looking at all things data visualization, and to help us on that journey we're going to be using Charts.js and Material UI. Now to visualize our charts and graphs we're going to be using Charts.js, and for our table data visualization we're going to be using Material UI's data grid component, as well as a few other bits and bobs along the way we're going to be adding to the project. That is what we'll be covering today. So if that sounds interesting, make sure to like and subscribe to support the channel, and follow me on Twitter at @thehashton to keep up to date with any new videos or developments on the channel. So without further ado, let's go build some charts. So the first thing we want to do is install some packages. To use Charts.js and MUI data grid, we're going to have to install them separately. So let's do that now on the terminal. So we'll be adding Charts.js and the Typescript types for that. We'll also be adding the data grid component from MUI-X, which is where some of their experimental components live. So let's install that now. Excellent, so that's all done. So let's go take a look at the project and see what our next steps are going to be. So this is our project right now. We can see that we're currently not logged in, which is absolutely fine. But one thing I have noticed is if we inspect this and we go down to more of a mobile tablet view, we kind of notice that this is slightly offset. That's because we added a setting to offset the side menu, but we didn't actually take into account that that isn't necessary when there isn't a side menu, i.e. when the user isn't logged in. So we do need to just quickly tidy that up, and I'll show you what I'm talking about right here. You can see that it's got the extra padding on the left, which is what we don't want. So we want to remove that when the user is not signed in to prevent that from happening. So let's go do that now. So all we want to do here is just add some styling to say we actually don't want padding if the user is logged in. So we'll add a style attribute to this main element, and we'll be targeting padding, and we'll say if the user is logged in then we want this padding on this main element. Otherwise, if the user is not logged in, we don't want any padding. And let's go see what that looks like. So if the user is not logged in, you can see the style is being applied here, and there's no padding now. So we don't have to cater for the side menu. So if we log in here, we now see that styling is back. So the styling is being added inside the main class inline. Now if we go into the style sheet, we can see that we do have the styling. So we don't need it anymore, and our website doesn't really cater for people who have JavaScript switched off. So unfortunately, they're not really going to be accessing this site. But if you were to build this in a way where you did cater for people who had JavaScript switched off, then you probably would definitely keep this as a fallback. But then you would have to tackle all the authentication issues and how they actually get to the dashboard without JavaScript. So there's a whole bunch of issues there. And I don't think it would work for a site like this. So we'll delete these. But obviously those types of things are considerations when you are building an app or building a website. How do people like that who don't have JavaScript enable access something if there is no JavaScript and you're doing everything in line? But there we go. Right, so that is all tidied up, and we've installed our Charts.js and our Material UI data grid component. So the next bit of housekeeping is the light theme. So I'll go off this. So if we go to the light theme, we can see that the background color is a very muddy gray color. It's kind of a brownish color. So what we want to do is slightly change that from it being a muddy gray, dark gray color to something slightly lighter and more in line with the light theme. So we'll go to light theme here and we'll just update it. So we've just updated these colors here to be a bit lighter. So particularly this background color is now much lighter. So if we check that out now, it's a much better light mode and it makes more sense. So let's go to the dashboard page. So this is the current dashboard page right now. We'd planned some kind of layout to have maybe some data cards up here, perhaps a chart down here, and then maybe another row below, maybe with Doughnut Charts or something like that. So to visualize that better, we're going to start scaffolding some of these components. And it's using a technique that I used when I first became a front-end developer, which helped me a lot to learn JavaScript and learn to plan a project out or plan a feature out. So if you go to the dashboard component here, what we'll do is we'll replace all of that with some of this scaffolding. So in here, we're planning to add these 3 features. So we'll have a data ribbon here showing numerical stats, and we want that to show a list of numbers that are important to the user who's using this dashboard. So these are immediate stats to do with maybe transactions or something like that. And down here, we want to show off a graph of some kind along with some cards to better visualize what that is. So you'll have a graph and then some cards maybe on the right or something like that. And then we probably want a few Doughnut charts to break down some data into fractions maybe. So we want to essentially have some data that's in a donut chart, and a circular donut chart, that's broken down into, particular types of transactions, maybe transactions per day, per month. So that could be quite interesting. So to begin with, what we'll do is we'll create the data ribbon component. So we'll go up here to components, we'll create a new one, and we'll call it data ribbon. And we'll just make sure we create an index.tsx file. Sorry, a TS file. Export the default. Okay, that's all connected. And within here, what we'll do is we'll create a very basic data ribbon component just to show that it's working. So we want a grid with a container property to show that this is a container grid from MUI, and then we'll just say it's a data ribbon. So that's being exported, and then we'll just go ahead and add this down here. Just make sure that this is imported. Okay, so now we're calling in the data ribbon component. Let's go to see if it's working. Brilliant. So we can see that that's showing, so that's all connected. So let's go back here. Now, in order to get this to work, we want several data card components. So let's go create that component here, because we want 3 data card components like this. So let's go check that out now. So let's create a new component. Now, to create the data card component, what we'll need to do is we'll put it in the components folder, but we're starting to collect a lot of dashboard components, and it's a bit weird having components that are specifically for one page and one feature and one section just in the general components root. So we'll create a dashboard folder and we'll create a data card component there. So within here, we'll create an index.ts, and then we'll go to data card here. Just create that. We'll make it a H1 as well. So that's created. Now the thing is, we've got the data ribbon outside of here. We actually want that within the dashboard component. So let's take that and put it in the dashboard component with data card, because that makes more sense, doesn't it? Just make sure to update the root here in your dashboard component so it's going from the right place. And let's open up the data card. We'll grab this a few times. Cool, so that should be imported now from the data card component. Let's go take a look. So we've got 3 data cards inside the data ribbon. Now let's just add a bit more to the data card. Brilliant. So we've now added some core styling, and essentially it's still within the grid container component we originally added. And within there, we've added our data ribbon H1 still. And within there, we've got our paper component that's wrapping it. And we've added some padding of 1 rem and made sure that it's got a height of 100% as some basic styling for our data card component. And we're doing this in here just to visualize what we kind of want from our data card, just to show it in the data ribbon for now. We've added some base styling on the inside, flex, making sure it's centered and that it's also aligned in the center as well, vertically. We've added some typography from Material UI, and we've set it to H6 with the color of light gray, which is kind of our subheader almost. And then we're adding a tooltip component so that when you hover over, you can actually see what the data visualization actually is. And then there's some more text inside there to show what that is. And then we've actually got our number here, which is the data that we want to display, which is 462. And we're trying to show total sales in this regard. So total sales is 462. Now let's go check that out. And visually, that's what that would look like. So we hover over that. The total of all Datasoft products in the current financial year, which is 462. So that's what one data card will look like. So we'll add some more to this component in the future, but let's actually turn this into its own component. Now we already have that with the data card component, so let's go ahead and bring that over and add it here. So what we've done here is we've added our data card component. We've added some props because we want to pass some values to this component, which is essentially a dumb component in that it doesn't do any business logic with information. So we're taking in title, value, and description. So title then deconstructed here. So we take title here and we're using that as the gray title that we saw earlier. And then the value, which is the number, and then the description, which goes in the tooltip and the title. When I say the title, it's when you hover over. So that's all set up as a data card component. You can see here we've deconstructed our props in React. And that's just so we don't have to type everything as props dot something. And we can also add default values if we want. If, for example, no data gets passed through, we can just say something like no description as a default value. And you can do that for all of these. I've actually done a video on React default props in functional components, so go check that out if you want to. Cool. And what we also want to do is just add some styling to the data card component. So we'll add a SAS module for this, and we'll add some basic styling. So we'll add the data card component, and we'll just make sure that it's position relative, basic styling. So now that we have the data card component set up, let's reintroduce that to our data ribbon component. So currently our data ribbon component looks like this, which has one deconstructed data card component. But let's now rejig this and add our data card components for real. So if we have a look at here, we're passing the title total sales, and we have the value of 462 and the description of the totals of all Datasoft products in the current financial year. Very simple, very straightforward. And you can see now we've got no need for all the icons and things and components we used earlier, so we can just delete these because they're now in the data card component. And I've added 3 other data card components here, so they're also having something else. So this is total value, this is average order value, and the conversion rate. So now that that is a part of the data ribbon component, we just need to make sure that this is styled as well. So let's add data ribbon.module.sass. So we're just going to add some basic styling here, and it's going to hinge around the tablet view. So once it gets to tablet view, which is traditionally 768, you can tweak this however you want, but this is what works for me personally. This is kind of the standard breakpoint on this app, is that we want it to be using grid CSS, and we want essentially 4 columns. So once it goes past tablet view, we want it to go into 4 columns. When it goes below tablet view, we want it to only show 1 column, so it goes to 100% width. So we just need to make sure we add the class name here. I believe that's right. Yep, so that's all hooked up. And let's go take a look. Oh, and we forgot to import SAS from data ribbon. Brilliant. And that should be all tied up. Let's refresh. So that's the data ribbon component so far. What we want though is this to be on the same line, so the icon and the title. So let's go tidy that up now. So we've got our header class name here, so let's just go add that styling now. Display flex. And there we go. So there's quite a lot of padding. So within here, we'll just say button has 0 padding. And maybe we'll say that for the paragraph element as well. Ooh, maybe not. All right, let's say 0.25 rem. There we go. I think that's a lot better now. What we've essentially done here is we're saying both of these have about 0.25 rem, which is just a few pixels, and that gives a nice little space between them, but also it makes it look quite nice. And you can see here, once it goes below tablet, it goes into full width into single columns, and then once it's past tablet, it goes into 4 columns. So that's the data ribbon component working quite well, and each one has their own unique bit of information about the data being shown. What I would say is probably just needs a bit more overall padding on the actual data card because it looks very thin. So let's do that now. So let's add a little padding here. So we'll just say 0.5 rem. That's okay. Maybe we'll just add a little bit more. Yeah, and I think we're quite happy with that. Yeah, it's quite nice. Maybe just a little bit less. We'll go 1 rem at the top and 0.5 on the sides. So I think what we'll do here is we'll bump this up to slightly higher. We'll use 900 pixels. So we'll say on 900 pixels, we want this to collapse. So at 900, it then goes into this mode. I think that looks a little bit better. But obviously you can tweak and play around with this. It depends on your data, obviously the text sizes that you use. But yeah, I think generally that should be fine. It's a lot better than 768 pixels. So the next component we want to add is the transactions per day. So that one's going to set us up to use graphs on the project. So let's get started now. So we'll go within dashboard and we'll create the transactions per day component. And just export. Cool. And then just make sure that that is called in. Right. So if we go take a look here, very basic, and you can see that it's being hidden currently. So we'll just add some margin top for now to show it. So there we go. That is the component. We'll have to tidy that up in a moment. So let's go to the transactions per day here and start adding some code to it and start building up this component. So this is our transactions per day component. What we've done is we've introduced a new type, which is our transaction card type, which brings in information for something similar to the data cards component we just created, but these will be smaller ones for this transaction component. So these will be transaction cards, and very similar. They need a title, a value, and a change value as well. So almost like the value that we had for the numbers in the last one. And then this component will have its own props where we pass in the data, and the data is quite important. So we don't really want it as an optional prop. So we'll make sure that we don't have it as optional. We've deconstructed that. We haven't used it yet because we haven't introduced our charts. So we'll be bringing in some theme options from MUI. So that's why we have this here, which is what this is. It's pulling in from MUI. And then we have our grid container component, which includes a wrapper styling, which we will add just now. Now, what this does is it adds a breakpoint for all of our elements within the transaction per day module. And essentially, we're going to be showing everything on a row for all intents and purposes. So we want display flex there. And then we have some styling for the transactions and the chart and the card wrapper. So now that we've added that styling, I'll show you the markup first, and then we'll go and explain what the styling does. So in here, we've added a paper component to wrap it all. So this is for the background of this component. This is the color that we want for it, and that should be able to switch colors when we switch between light and dark theme. We've added a container for our chart, which will go here, and we've left a comment for where our chart will go. And then we've just added a title here using the MUI typography component. And then this is our card. So you can see there's a very clear division between the charts and the card wrappers. So these are the cards that I spoke to you about, and this is all contained within this paper component. So we'll open this up and we'll have a look at the cards. So you can see that we're using the card components from Material UI. So there's default MUI card components that we can use. We're using the outlined version of these, so that means that it's just the outline, it's not so much filled. And then we're adding our own styling on top of that. So we'll open these up and have a look at what one looks like. Very similar to the data card component. It has a title and has a value, and then it has an interesting thing underneath. It has a percentage or change of that value, and it's being used with the theme palette success color, and that's why we're pulling in the theme from MUI here. So that's essentially what we're doing. The rest is very similar. We're using 3 bits of detail, so total products, by to detail, and refunds. So that's what we'll be using here, and our styling is essentially doing that. So our transactions and our chart styling. So now you can see here with our chart styling, what we're saying is we want the chart to take up 80% of the width, and we want the cards to take up 20% of the width. And then we have some general card styling to add some padding, some border radius to the cards, and just make sure it's all aligned in the center. And yeah, and then now do some styling for the fonts and just some font sizes. So that's it. It's very basic styling. Let's go take a look at what that looks like. So you can see here, this is our styling. It's left room for the chart to go here, and we've got our cards on the right. And if we switch from light to dark mode, you can see because we've used Material UI, it switches with us, which is perfect. Now let's go ahead and add our chart here. Now we're actually going to create a component that isn't within the dashboard component. We're actually going to create a data chart component here. And this will be separate because we may want to use this chart in separate places, and I'll explain why. We'll just add an index file as well. So this is our chart component. I'll break it down for you. So these are our props that we want to pass because we want to create a reusable chart component. In it, we'll be taking in the data that's used by the chart and then the options for the chart. So the theme, the type of chart it is. So is it a line chart, an area chart, a polar chart, a bar chart? All of that is contained within here. We also want to make sure that we're pulling in some other helper utility files. And then we're using a use effect to make sure that we essentially run this once, but it updates if the data changes, which is very important to anyone who's using data that might update or it is basically streamed in or something like that. So this is basically, it changes if the data changes, which is very handy. And then we're using the canvas element to essentially show the chart. and then Charts.js just hooks into that and puts the chart into there. So that's our data chart component. Now let's go add some of these files up here. We need to add our themes file. So let's just go here and create themes.ts. What this does is this essentially contains our light and dark themes for Charts.js. So within here, we want our Y axis to begin at 0, and we also want it to be a certain color. We've chosen a lighter color for this because it obviously is the lighter theme. And in the dark theme, we have also asked it to begin at 0 and chose slightly darker colors for the Y and X axes, and the ticks, which are essentially the incremental lines that dictate, oh, this is a next bit of measurement. So, you know, if you had January, February, March, the little lines that come down, those are ticks, and they have labels off them. So that's essentially what that is. And then just some plugins. So we want the legends to be in a white color on obviously a dark background. So that's all set up. That should now be pulled in here. We just need to add the months helper utility file. So we'll go to the source folder here, and we'll just create a new folder called helper, and then we'll create a util file. Now, this particular utility file is mentioned in the documents of Charts.js. If you come across this, it's not actually provided by Charts.js, annoyingly. So you have to go in and create one yourself. This is one that I've created for anything months based or time based. So I've just added 12 months here in an array, and then we've got some logic here to handle the months in the chart as well. So all of this code will be in the repository. I'll link in the description so you can check it out there. So we go back here, and then you can see that we now are able to connect to our utility file and grab our months, and we also have our dark options here. So now that our data chart is set up, we can go ahead and add that back to our transactions per day component. So if we go to line 26 and just add that there, let's make sure we import that. Now you can see here that we want some data to add for this. We currently don't have any right now, but we will create some called line chart data, because essentially this is a line chart. Let's go ahead and add our line chart data now. So if we go within our dashboard component, and this is simply because this is a UI tutorial, we're going to mock our data. And for those unfamiliar with the concept, the idea is that normally when you work on projects like this, you would have an API or a service from the backend or the backend team to work with to build your UI. However, in some circumstances, that's not the case, and the UI could be working ahead of the backend, or there just simply isn't anything there right now. So for that to work, all we do is we mock it out by creating our response and have it hard coded just to use for now to get the UI to work. So that's exactly what we'll do now. So we'll create a mock data.ts file, add our code, and in here all we've got is our line chart data and then some Doughnut chart data to add Doughnut charts later to the project. So we'll leave that for now, but this is what we need to be focusing on. You can see here we're utilizing the months helper file that we created, or the month helper utility function we created. And then this is our data set, very basic data set, and that should be enough to be getting on with. Get rid of that now. So let's go import this in. Right, now let's go take a look to see how this looks. Amazing. So we can see here now that we have Charts.js working, and you can see that it's already animated and it's working great. It's even actually responsive, which is amazing. And it works with Material UI and also Charts.js theme options that we added. So if you go here, you can see a light mode, and then you can see a dark mode as well. We even have our own legend, which we can toggle on or off if we want to see something. So we can click that, it's toggled off, we click it on, and it animates back on again. So it's asking us for some data here, but we don't actually need to add the data at that point. So we could actually get rid of this prop. So we don't actually need this. Perfect. It was just a bit of future proofing in case we did, but we don't. We can get rid of all these. Go check that out. Yep, it's still working. A little unhappy with this gap, but we'll fix this soon. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to add our transactions bottom row component here. And to do that, we'll just go back into the dashboard component folder, and we will create a transactions bottom row component. And we'll just add that there. Make sure to add an index.tx. Go back to dashboard here, add transactions bottom row, and let's see what that looks like. Well, let's just change this to H1. Cool, and we can see that we now have our transactions bottom row here. So let's go and add some code here. So we've added some code here. I've added some styling as well. So we'll just quickly add that before I explain the markup. So we'll just add some styling here. So just again, we're using the data grid component. We're going to have 4 card components with the breakpoint at 900 pixels and just some simple gap styling as well to add a bit of spacing between the cards. And then we'll just import that. So now we have bottom row. So I'll show you what we've got here. And we essentially got 4 of the same things. But we're wrapping our paper components in a grid component. And what we want is to show just a bit of text, a title, say transactions per user. So that's the title for this particular card. And then we want to add our data chart component again, but this time we're using a Doughnut type for the chart, and we're importing Doughnut chart data. So this is coming from the mock data file we created earlier. And that's just got our colors here, which are set here. These are the labels for them. So we can set this to anything we want. We've just set this to the default, just to essentially show you what it looks like. But this will be just repeated several times, and you can go in and tweak this, and you can add several different versions of this if you want, with all different data sets, and that's totally up to you. I'll use just this one data set for now, repeated, just to give you an idea. So let's go back to transactions bottom row, and you can see that I've added slightly different titles. Now, if you wanted to take it one step further, you could create individual components for these and add some titles and things. But because it's only 4 and it's only used on the dashboard page, I don't think it needs to be recreated. Because if this needed to be used on another page, then you could argue in the rule of 2 or in the drive principle would need to recreate it. But because we're not recreating it, and because we're not repeating ourselves twice, which is the rule of 2, then you don't do it. Just to explain the rule of 2 for those unfamiliar, if you do something once, that's fine. And if you need to do the very exact same thing again in your code, generally then you start to abstract it and try to make it a lot less repeated. Some people use the rule of 3, but I prefer the rule of 2, but that's all down to preference. So let's go check it out. So this is what our bottoms row component looks like, and that kind of completes the dashboard view at a glance. We just need to tidy up these 2 components here because they've got a spacing issue, but we can easily sort that out by adding a grid component, which we'll do now. So we've rejigged the dashboard component, and all we're doing is we're adding a wrapper grid component around these 2 components here. We've added a little gap between them to add some spacing and a bit of margin top to give some spacing from the header. So what we need to do to fix this issue is just change this gap value to be 4. So between the components, we just need to create a little extra space. And what that does, that gives us a nice bit of spacing between the data cards and this bottom row. So now we can see that we've got an issue on these data card components. And that is, if we try to be responsive, we have this little weird issue. And that's because we've just forgotten to add some styling to these data cards. You can see that they're not very styled right now. So let's go back and add the final styling to finish those bottom row data cards off. So the first thing we want to do is just add some styling to these cards. So we'll give each of these a class name of data card. And then if we go into the style sheet, the module style sheet, and we'll add the data card class, which also styles the paragraph element. But what we're doing is we're setting the max width on this to take into account some of the other padding and spacing, so that we don't have that issue where we're overlapping in width at all. So now if we try to do this, you can see that that is styled. And then when we try to reduce the width, it corrects itself. And the further down we go, the more it corrects itself. And then eventually when we go down to a lower resolution, a mobile resolution, it goes down to this. So we can sort these colors out as well. So if, for example, we don't want red, blue, and yellow, we can go for some other colors that might fit what we've been doing a bit better. So let's go and quickly add some different colors. So if we go into the mock data file, and we'll change some of these colors. So we'll add perhaps different shades of red. We'll do that. Maybe add like a bit of a purple vibe and then maybe a bit of a lighter color. And if we go back and take a look, we can now see that has updated. And if we go to dark and light mode, we can see that still stays the same. So there you go. You can see we've changed the colors there. But what we want to do is fill out some of this space on the bottom. We can see now that we've built the dashboard up, but it seems pretty empty at the bottom. So let's add our footer. And we'll go into components and we'll go new, and we'll go footer.tsx. Create a new footer component, and we have to make an index file, and we will make a style sheet as well. So footer.module.sass, because we're using module CSS or sass. Cool. Export from the index file, and then just make sure we include that in the layout component. So let's go to the layout component. So just under here, under props.children, we'll add the footer component. Brilliant, that has been added. Let's go take a look. Now you can barely see it just about there, but there is a footer component. In fact, let's go to footer and change this to a H1, and you should be able to see that a little bit better now. So that's our footer component. Now we are going to replace that. Now let's replace this with a proper footer. So just to explain what we've done here, we've added a footer component, and in here we've made sure to add our authentication session, because we are going to be adding some sign in and sign out functionality. We need to include our theme from MUI for some styling for light and dark mode, and we've included some styling for some links, because our footer is essentially going to have links, and we'll be using next link to transport us from page to page through our different routes. And you can see I'm just using our theme colors here for our text, and it's just tying into that. So when it switches between themes, it knows what to do. And we've wrapped this up into a semantic footer element. So if you don't know what semantic elements are, they're essentially not your normal div and span type elements. They're more semantic or meaningful for the reason you're using them. So for example, if you're using a heading or a header or a list or a paragraph element or a footer, then you use something like this, so a footer. So we're using a footer here, and we've got it wrapped in a paper element, so similar to the cards and things. So it has a background, a nice background and card feel, so you can switch in and out. We've said we want it to be as large as it can be, and we've set a default color, and we've added a unordered list because that's going to contain our menu items. we can see now that we're adding some list items. Now, for accessibility reasons, if you are using this as a menu, you need to also tell screen readers that you are using this as a menu. So make sure that wherever you are deciding to set your menu, that you're setting the role to menu as well, so that you know that, so that screen readers know that there is a menu here to be used. Within here we have some footer links, which is essentially styled over the link component from next link, and we're only styling the text. And all the pages are here: home, data, profile, settings. The same are in the side menu, and they're linking us to the pages in question. Now you can abstract this by having a roots file that contains all your roots, and because we're using this twice now, the rule of two, we should probably set up a roots file and put that in there. Now I'll leave that up to you to do, and it can just be anything. It can be a JSON file, it can be a TypeScript file, whatever it is, and you just contain an object with your roots in it. And what it means is you just update it in one place and it updates everywhere, and it's just a string. The more interesting part is down here. So we've got our terms and conditions and our accessibility statement, which is what every website should have if you have the intention of making it accessible to everyone with disabilities. So basically just outlining here what you're planning to do to make the site accessible, what your goals are, what rating you're trying to aim for, what you've done to try and achieve those goals, and things like that really. And the button down here is to help the user sign in and out. Now the reason why this is a really good option to have is because you're giving a second way for users to navigate the site. Now for good accessibility, you do need more than one way to access the same page, because if anything happens to one page and it, for one reason or another it becomes bugged or visually is obstructed, it becomes difficult to visit that page for a keyboard only user. But with something like this, somebody else with a disability and uses only a keyboard and a screen reader can access that site. Interesting fact, or maybe not so interesting, not everyone that is a keyboard user uses a screen reader, so there's that to consider as well. But this is the situation we have now with the footer, which is kind of a catch-all situation. Let's go have a look and see how that looks. So if you go down currently, that's what it looks like. It's just missing a bit of styling. So we can still visit all our pages. Yeah, and we can see that works. And it's appearing on every page now because we've added it to the layout component. But we just need to style it a little bit more. So let's go ahead and do that. Perfect. So we want to make it a static position that stays at the bottom. And we want to make sure it goes across 100%. And we want to have a little bit of space in between the content above by about 5 rem. And we just want to add a bit of flex box to the unordered list. Yeah, some other basic stylings to do with hovering. So we want to add an underline when we hover over these links. Amazing. Let's go take a look. So this is the footer. So very simple, but it has everything we need. We've currently not added a terms and conditions page or an accessibility statement. What we've done for now is we've just added a £sign and put terms and conditions, which just means whichever page is on, it will update. So in the future, you can go ahead and add your own page here in the pages section for terms and conditions accessibility statement and add your own. And you can see here we've got the sign in and sign out method, which comes from Next.js, which gives us that functionality to use Next.js with confidence and be able to sign in and sign out depending on if they are already logged in. It will show them the correct button and the correct text. It also changes the color of the button as well based on whether they're logged in or not. So if they're logged in, it's going to show a red button and ask them to sign out, and if they are logged out, it'll show them a green one, success, to ask them to log in. So if we sign out, we can then see the footer with the sign in button here, and then we click sign in again, and we're signed in, and we can see our login page. So now we've got this set up, let's go to the data page. Now the data page is currently empty, but what we want to add here is a really nice table from MUI called the data grid table. And we're going to add just some mock data that MUI has provided themselves. So we're going to have a look to see what the data grid table actually looks like. So this is the data grid table from MUI. And what we're going to build is something very similar to this version here. So this has lots and lots of columns. I think it's about 20, 25 or something like that. And each of them have this amazing mock data to help get up and running. But the whole point of the data grid component is to be this very complex table component that you can do all kinds of stuff with. There's pagination, sorting, search, exporting as a CSV. Yeah, it's got the works. And there's a reason why they sell this as a pro version. But we're going to be using the MUIX version, which I believe is the free version. So let's go to the data page and just edit this here. Let's close all these other tabs down. So we want to add our MUI grid component. So this is the updated data component. And essentially what we're doing is we're pulling demo data from the MUIX data grid generator, and that just generates some dummy data for your data grid. So we've chosen to use the commodity data set. So it's commodity, and then there's like some users or profiles or something like that. So it's employee, so that was the actual name for it. But we'll use commodity for now. We want the row length to be about 500 and want there to be about 15 columns. You can reduce this or increase this as much as you want, or as much data you want to show off. We'll leave the H1 of data for now, just to make sense of where we're at. And we've got some dummy text here. And then we've got our data grid component, which we're pulling in from MUIX. And yeah, that is that essentially. That's the data coming in from the demo data. So it's very simple. That's essentially it. That's the data grid table there for now, very simplified, and it can get a little bit more complicated, but this is the benefit of using MUI. It takes very complicated components and makes it very simple for you. Has accessibility built in, theming built in, light and dark mode already built in. Yeah, very cool. So let's go take a look and see what that looks like. And there we go. So that is our data component right here. So you can see we have plenty of pages. We have 500 bits of information, 500 rows of information. It goes down to 100 here. You can make this as tall as you want. So if we go back here and we increase this height to 900, you can make this bigger, and then you can actually see more, and you can scroll through it. And it's a very big database. You can select, you can sort. You can filter, so you can sort by descending. You can choose how many you want to show on a page. So if you want to just show 25 rows, you can do, and it just increases, how much you have to tap on the right. But yeah, it's all styled, animated, accessible. It remembers what you've clicked. That's our data page, and this kind of showcases how we can visualize data in a table. And tables can get very complicated. I've built a few custom tables in the past at companies I've worked at, and it is always a crazy endeavor. So I'm very glad MUI have built something as good as this, because it does help a lot. Now, one annoying thing is, if we want to go back to the dashboard, we don't actually have a menu option to go specifically to the dashboard. And the dashboard itself is considered the home page of this admin section of this app. So you would assume it's the home page. But the only way you can get there is by clicking the logo. So if you click the logo here, then you get to the dashboard. But there's no option here. It's not very clear. So we're going to make that a little bit more clearer by adding a home icon to this side menu and linking it to here. And so let's go ahead and do that now. Let's just update it. So let's open up the side menu and just make sure we pull in the home icon. And we just want to update this menu root list to include the home page, and then just update this to include home as well. And then simply in the menu list icons array, we add the home icon. And it's as simple as that. The rest has already been taken care of. We don't need to add any more. Let's go take a look. And you can see now there is a home icon. And if we expand this, we can see that it says home as well. So you click that and we go to home. If we want to go to the data page, we're now on the data page. And if we want to go back to home, there we go. So that is the data dashboard so far. We do have a little bit, we do have a few last things to do. So we have the profile page and the settings page left to do, but we're pretty much nearing the end of the series and we're almost complete. So for all of those that have been following along from the first video or just wanted to see how you were going to add some charts, and that is our dashboard. And there we go. So that is a little bit of data visualization added to our app in the form of charts and tables. And there you go. So we've added a lot of visual data to our data dashboard in the form of charts through Charts.js and tables through MUI. We've added quite a bit, and we've even updated the side menu and added a whole footer as well. Quite a lot for one session. So if you have been following along from the very start and coding as well, or planning to code after the series has ended, by the end of this, you'll have a very impressive data dashboard to call your own. Now I will put the link to the repo in the description below, so you can go take a look, have a look at the code, and see how I coded all of this in detail. You can see all the steps, how I went along. We do have a little bit more to go in the series and polish off the profile and settings page and maybe a few other bits and bobs. But if you've enjoyed the series, and make sure to like and subscribe to support the channel and keep informed of any new videos and series on the way similar to this. And I'd also really appreciate it if you followed me on Twitter at @thehashton. But other than that, take care, and I'll see you in the next one.